world's writers will walk through those gates. And if you hang around, you get a chance to talk to them.
I'm interested in conversations that deal with things that matter, but real, how do we live our lives?
First of all, make climate change personal in your life. The second step is get angry and get active. And the third step, and believe it or not, I think this is the most important. We have to imagine this world that we want to hurry towards.
It's about kindness is looking at people as people and not as I voted this, I do this, whatever it is. There are some people we will never get along with, but most of us are a complex mass of different things.
Hello, I'm Julia Donaldson. Some of you might know me from some of the books I've written, such as The Gruffalo or What the Ladybird Heard. Well, one of the things that I really love normally about coming to the Edinburgh International Book Festival is meeting children who love to read and bringing my stories to life for them on the stage. This year, of course, none of the authors or illustrators can do that. But I am delighted that this year's online book festival is available and free to so many children in so many different places. So I hope that anyone watching has a wonderful time and that it makes you want to read lots and lots of books.
Welcome to the Edinburgh International Book Festival. We are here in the beautiful gardens of Belcombe Court, where I will be joined by Helena Bonham Carter, Tobias Menzies and Jamael Westman for the launch of A Poem for Every Autumn Day, the first of a series of seasonal anthologies that I've curated for Macmillan. Hosting an event packed full of poetry that distills and celebrates the autumnal months feels like a particularly fitting endeavour at this moment in time. Firstly, and most obviously, because we currently find ourselves standing at the threshold of seasonal change. The blistering heat of summer beating on our backs in farewell. The blustery, cooling wind of autumn beckoning us forward. But there is also something aptly analogous between autumn and our brave new pandemic-stricken world. After all, both are defined by uncertainty, constant flux and trepidation about what's yet to come. Both force people to retreat and become more cloistered away. Both plunge us into dark times in which light seems sometimes all too distant. Great poetry helps remind us that we're not the first nor the last to go through what we're feeling. It enables us to share and communicate our joys and sorrows and allows us to escape into different worlds, real and imagined, when we need relief from our own. All of this, and to paraphrase Emily Dickinson, it never asks a crumb of us in return. In this vibrant and vital poem, the Victorian poet Gerard Manley Hopkins recreates the overwhelming joy he felt on one particular autumnal stroll, and through the immediacy of his verse, lets us share in his awe for this bucolic harvest scene. Hopkins was a Jesuit priest as well as a poet, and there are clear religious overtones. But these lines also offer a celebration of the unpredictable, wild wonders of autumn.
Summer ends now. Now, barbarous in beauty, the stooks arise around. Up above, what wind walks, what lovely behaviour of silk-sack clouds. And has wilder, wilful, wavier meal-drift moulded ever, melted across skies? I walk, I lift up, heart, eyes, down all that glory in the heavens to glean our Saviour. And eyes, heart, what looks, what lips yet give you a rapturous love's greeting of realer, of rounder replies. And the azurous-hung hills are his world-wielding shoulder majestic. As a stallion stalwart, very violet sweet, these things were here and but the beholder wanting, which two, when they once meet, the heart rears wings bold and bolder and hurls for him, oh, half hurls earth for him, off under his feet.
This tender poem by the Guyanese-British poet John Agard pays testament to the soothing power of the natural world when we encounter nothing but hostility and malice in our personal interactions. Here a young boy is prey to the school bully, who not only physically hurts him, but perhaps worse, humiliates and derides his feelings. The child finds that words elude him. He cannot articulate or share his pain with anyone, except for the birds, who are always there, always listening. Not in an eerie Hitchcockian way, of course, but in a comforting way that inspires the poor boy to soar above his cruel peers.
The hurt boy talked to the birds and fed them the crumbs of his heart. It was not easy to find the words for secrets he hid under his skin. The hurt boy talked of a bully's fist that made his face a bruised moon, his spectacles stamped to ruin. It was not easy to find the words for things that nightly hissed, as if his pillow was a hideaway for creepy crawlies, the notes sent to the girl he fancied held high in mockery. But the hurt boy talked to the birds, and their feathers gave him welcome. Their wings taught him new ways to become.
Emily Dickinson imbues these 6 lines with wisdom and philosophical considerations as she delivers a perfect riposte to those who argue that words fail to articulate the essence of thoughts and feelings, or that poetry only has power when written on the page.
A word is dead when it is said, some say. I say it just begins to live. That day.
11th of September marks one of the gravest autumn days in recent history. Although that horrific, era-defining event is never explicitly mentioned in this poem by the Pakistan-born British writer Imtiaz Darka, the attacks that day in 2001 in America cast a long shadow over the text. Her main focus here is on the fallout born from the tragedy, when a vengeful and confused public wanted someone to blame and began to show indiscriminate hostility towards Middle Eastern people, and when the words freedom fighter and terrorist became highly contested labels.
Outside the door, lurking in the shadows, is a terrorist. Is that the wrong description? Outside that door, taking shelter in the shadows, is a freedom fighter. I haven't got this right. Outside, waiting in the shadows, is a hostile militant. A word's no more than wavering flags. Outside your door, watchful in the shadows, is a guerrilla warrior. God help me. Outside, defying every shadow, stands a martyr. I saw his face. No words can help me now. Just outside the door, lost in the shadows, is a child who looks like mine. One word for you. Outside my door, his hand too steady, his eyes too hard, is a boy who looks like your son too. I open the door. Come in, I say. Come in and eat with us. The child steps in and carefully, at my door, takes off his shoes.
In this next poem, Yorkshire poet Ted Hughes traces the autumnal transition from the dying days of summer to a cold and colourless winter through the journey of leaves. Although the text is shrouded by a funereal tone that occasionally verges even on the violent and visceral, there's also something quite poignantly heartwarming about the way in which Hughes personifies different elements of a pastoral landscape. For while it is a poem about death, it is also a poem about sisterhood in nature, as everything from the sunset to the birds come together to grieve for the end of summer. But autumn, Hughes quietly suggests, is not just a time for mourning, but a period of equilibrium, renewal, and restoration, when the falling leaves nourish growing marrows and flowing rivers clear away the detritus.
Who's killed the leaves?
Me, says the apple. I've killed them all. Fat as a bomb or a cannonball. I've killed the leaves.
Who sees them drop?
Me, says the pear. They will leave me all bare, so all the people can point and stare. I see them drop.
Who'll catch their blood?
Me, says the marrow. I'll get so rotund that they'll need a wheelbarrow. I'll catch their blood.
Who'll make their shroud?
Me, says the swallow. There's just time enough before I must pack all my spools and be off. I'll make their shroud.
Who'll dig their grave?
Me, says the river. With the power of the clouds, a brown, deep grave I'll dig under my floods. I'll dig their grave.
Who'll be their parson?
Me, says the crow. For it is well known I studied the Bible right down to the bone. I'll be their parson.
Who'll be their chief mourner?
Me, says the wind. I will cry through the grass. The people will pale and go cold when I pass. I'll be chief mourner.
Who'll carry the coffin?
Me, says the sunset. The whole world will weep to see me lower it into the deep. I'll carry the coffin.
Who'll sing the psalm?
Me, says the tractor. With my gear grinding glottal, I'll plough up the stubble and sing through my throttle. I'll sing the psalm.
Who'll toll the bell?
Me, says the robin. My song in October will tell the still gardens the leaves are over. I'll toll the bell.
On the surface, this piece by the American poet Sylvia Plath is a defence of the elegance of the helpless pheasant and a plea against the callousness of game shooting, a favourite pastime of her husband Ted Hughes. But knowledge of their tempestuous marriage and Hughes's infidelities lends the poem a personal poignancy. It's no longer a rebuke of hunting, but an account of a wife's attempt to salvage her fragile sense of worth in the face of her husband's unthinking cruelty.
You said you would kill it this morning. Do not kill it. It startles me still. The jut of that odd, dark head pacing through the uncut grass on the Elm's Hill. It is something to own a pheasant, or just to be visited at all. I'm not mystical. It isn't as if I thought it had a spirit. It is simply in its element. That gives it a kingliness, a right. The print of its big foot last winter, the trail track, on the snow in our court. The wonder of it. In that pallor through the crosshatch of sparrow and starling. Is it its rareness, then? It is rare. But a dozen would be worth having. 100 on that hill. Red, green, crossing and recrossing, a fine thing. It is such a good shape, so vivid, as a little cornucopia. It unclaps, brown as a leaf, and loud, settles in the elm, and is easy. It was sunning in the Narcissi. I trespass stupidly. Let be. Let be.
Ted Hughes wrote this poem in 1962, the same year that Plath penned The Pheasant. Here he presents himself not as the brutal shooter, but as a tender and doting father. It describes a moment of wonderment experienced by his and Plath's infant daughter in the garden of their Devon home. Frida Hughes, the only surviving member of that family, is now a successful poet and artist in her own right.
The cool, small evening shrunk to a dog bark and the clank of a bucket, and you, listening. A spider's web tense for the dew's touch. A pail lifted, still and brimming, mirror to tempt a first star to a tremor. Cows are going home in the lane there, looping the hedges with their warm wreaths of breath. A dark river of blood, many boulders, balancing unspilled milk. Moon, you cry suddenly. Moon, moon. The moon has stepped back like an artist, gazing amazed at a work that points at him, amazed.
The Indian writer Rabindranath Tagore was the recipient of the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1913 and was a noted artist and musician as well as a poet. This next poem is about quietly attempting to make contact with the universe outside of yourself. The paper boats themselves act like Tagore's poems. He does not know where they will travel, nor what they will mean to his readers. But in his dreams, they take on a life of their own.
Day by day, I float my paper boats one by one down the running stream. In big black letters, I write my name on them and the name of the village where I live. I hope that someone in some strange land will find them and know who I am. I load my little boats with shuli flowers from our garden and hope that these blooms of the dawn will be carried safely to land in the night. I launch my paper boat and look into the sky and see the little clouds setting their white bulging sails. I know not what playmate of mine sends them down the air to race with my boats. When night comes, I bury my face in my arms and dream that my paper boats float on and on under the midnight stars. The fairies of sleep are sailing in them, and the lading is their baskets full of dreams.
The Irish poet Seamus Heaney's poem about his father and his grandfather at work digging ends as a reflection on his own craft. He's not a skilled agriculturist, but a writer, and the poet has to reconcile with the fact that he is not his father nor his grandfather, and he will go to do the work he knows best.
Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests, snug as a gun. Under my window, a clean rasping sound when the spade sinks into gravelly ground, my father digging. I look down, till his straining rump among the flower beds bends low, comes up 20 years away, stooping in rhythm through potato drills where he was digging. The coarse boot nestled on the lug. The shaft against the inside knee was levered firmly. He rooted out tool tops, buried the bright edge deep to scatter new potatoes that we picked, loving their cool hardness in our hands. By God, the old man could handle a spade, just like his old man. My grandfather cut more turf in a day than any other man on Toner's bog. Once I carried him milk in a bottle corked sloppily with paper. He straightened up to drink it, then fell to right away, nicking and slicing neatly, heaving sods over his shoulder, going down and down for the good turf. Digging. The cold smell of potato mould, the squelch and slap of soggy peat, the curt cuts of an edge through living roots awaken in my head. But I have no spade to follow men like them. Between my finger and my thumb, the squat pen rests. I'll dig with it.
This short poem dates back to medieval times, when the printed book had only just appeared. Poems would have been sung or chanted and passed down the generations through an oral tradition. We can revive that here.
Western wind, when wilt thou blow? The small Rhine down come ride. Christ, if me love were in me arms, and I in bed again. Western wind, when wilt thou blow? The small rain down come ride. Christ, if me love were in me arms, and I in bed again.
Despite being welcomed with open arms to the pantheon of all-time greats, much of Elizabeth Bishop's poetry plots a struggle to find a sense of belonging and is marked by an underlying sense of loss and alienation. This poem, written to her female friend, an object of her affection, is powerful in its expression of loss, anxiety, and longing.
In your next letter, I wish you'd say where you are going and what you are doing. How are the plays, and after the plays, what are the pleasures you're pursuing? Taking cabs in the middle of the night? Driving as if to save your soul? Where the road goes round and round the park, and the meter glares like a moral owl? And the trees look so queer and green, standing alone in the big black caves. And suddenly you're in a different place where everything seems to happen in waves. And most of the jokes you just can't catch, like dirty words rubbed off a slate. And the songs are loud, but somehow dim, and it gets so terribly late. And coming out of the brownstone house to the grey sidewalk, the watered street, one side of the buildings rises with the sun like a glistening field of wheat. Wheat, not oats, dear. I'm afraid if it's wheat, it's none of your sowing. Nevertheless, I'd like to know what you are doing and where you're going.
In this humbling reflection on the transience of all human endeavours, Shelley describes how even ostensibly monolithic dynasties are inevitably laid waste by time. Having died in 1822 at the age of just 29, Shelley's legacy as a writer remains as one of a young contrarian firebrand, deeply sceptical and critical of the systems of power, control, and colonisation. And while this sonnet could be read simply as a fatalistic acceptance that nothing endures, it also puts forward a faith in time as the great leveller, and serves to console us that all regimes and despots will meet an unceremonious end.
I met a traveller from an antique land who said, "Two vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand half sunk a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command tell that its sculptor well those passions read, which yet survive stamped on these lifeless things, the hand that mocked them and the heart that fed." And on the pedestal these words appear: "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair. Nothing beside remains. Round the decay of these colossal wreck, boundless and bare, the lone and level sands stretch far away."
This next poem by Stevie Smith was published in 1957. In an interview about the poem, she explained that it was about how many people pretend out of bravery that they are very jolly and ordinary sort of chaps, when actually they find life to be a struggle. They're not waving, but drowning. As the days get shorter and nights darker and more enveloping throughout autumn, it's easy to find one's mood plummet. Here, it's as if Smith is calling on us to look out for our friends, whose cheerful personas may belie some personal troubles.
Nobody heard him, the dead man. But still, he lay moaning. I was much further out than you thought, and not waving, but drowning. Poor chap. He always loved larking. And now he's dead. It must have been too cold for him, for his heart gave way, they said. Oh, no, no, no. It was too cold always. Still, the dead one lay moaning. I was much too far out all my life, and not waving, but drowning.
Yeats wrote this poem for Maud Gonne, the Irish actress, suffragette and revolutionary activist who was a frequent muse of his and the object of no fewer than 4 proposals by the poet. It's a beautifully heart-rending piece of verse in which the poet emphasises that his love transcends mere physical considerations and will endure unwavering.
When you are old and grey and full of sleep and nodding by the fire, take down this book and slowly read, and dream of the soft look your eyes had once, and of their shadows deep. How many loved your moments of glad grace, and loved your beauty with love false or true. But one man loved the pilgrim soul in you, and loved the sorrows of your changing face. And bending down beside the glowing bars, murmur a little sadly how love fled and paced upon the mountains overhead and hid his face amid a crowd of stars.
The late 19th century and 20th century poet A. Housman said that the business of poetry is to harmonise the sadness of the universe. Housman suffered a particular sadness when at Oxford he fell deeply in love with his roommate Moses Jackson and was so distracted by his grief that he failed his finals. This poem was published in his 1896 book, A Shropshire Lad, and like many of the poems in the collection, it is narrated by a speaker looking back on his youth. Whereas Ozymandias looks at the gradual rise and fall of empires over epochs, Housman's poem reminds us that a year can feel like a very long, significant time, especially in early adulthood.
When I was 1 and 20, I heard a wise man say, Give crowns and pounds and guineas, but not your heart away. Give pearls away and rubies, but keep your fancy free. But I was 1 in 20. Now used to talk to me. When I was 1 in 20, I heard him say again, the art out of the bosom is never given in vain. 'Tis paid with sighs aplenty and sold for endless rue. And I am 2 in 20. I know, 'tis true, 'tis true.
Written in 1940, this poem expresses the anxieties of a world in the midst of being plunged into another devastating war. The refrain of, "If I could tell you, I would let you know," betrays a certain desperate search for some tangible assurances and explanations. But there is perhaps also a sense of comfort from the fact that in a life of fluctuations, time remains the only constant.
Time will say nothing, but I told you so. Time only knows the price we have to pay. If I could tell you, I would let you know. If we should weep when clowns put on their show, if we should stumble when musicians play, time will say nothing but, I told you so. There are no fortunes to be told, although because I love you more than I can say, if I could tell you, I would let you know. The winds must come from somewhere when they blow. There must be reason why the leaves decay. The time will say nothing but, I told you so. Perhaps the roses really want to grow. The vision seriously intends to stay. If I could tell you, I would let you know. Suppose the lions all get up and go, and the brooks and soldiers run away. Will time say nothing but, I told you so? If I could tell you, I would let you know.
These next two works by the American modernist poet William Carlos Williams are the perfect example of imagist poems, taking as their focal point a single snapshot of life.
I've eaten the plums that were in the icebox that you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were so delicious, so sweet, so cold.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. There's no white chickens.
Well, I was slightly jealous of them all being outside, so I've come out now for this next poem, which, in it almost sounds as if the 13th century Persian poet Rumi is telling his readers to embrace dark thoughts, shame and malice. But what he's really saying is to invite them in, even if they appear to be disagreeable or upsetting. The worst thing to do is to ignore your feelings. You never know if they might turn out to be significant and illuminating in the future, in ways that might escape you in the present.
This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival. A joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they are a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honourably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice. Meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Born in St. Lucia, Derek Walcott ranks among the finest of Caribbean poets. His writings earned him the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1992. This poem is about learning to love yourself at the end of a relationship. If Stevie Smith asks us to look out for others in Not Waving But Drowning, then Walcott is imploring us to take care of ourselves, just as we would take care of our friends.
The time will come when, with elation, you will greet yourself arriving at your own door, in your own mirror, and each will smile at the other's welcome and say, "Sit here, eat." You will love again the stranger who was yourself. Give wine, give bread, give back your heart to itself, to the stranger who has loved you all your life, whom you ignored for another, who knows you by heart. Take down the love letters from the bookshelf, the photographs, the desperate notes. Peel your own image from the mirror. Sit. Feast on your life.
Our final poem today is also the final poem of A Poem for Every Autumn Day. Here, the colours of nature fade as winter approaches, and nothing can stop the passing of time. But while it's true that nothing can remain forever, it doesn't mean that the wonderful golden hues of autumn don't return every year. Winter may seem dark and forbidding, but it won't be long before we're hurrahing in harvest once again.
Nature's first green is gold, her hardest hue to hold. Her early leafs a flower, but only so an hour. And then leaf subsides to leaf. So Eden sank to grief, so dawn goes down to day. Nothing gold can stay.